Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to Season 2 of the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kayla Smith, CEO of the Hormone P.U.Z.L.E Society, a women's health hub for fertility, hormones, and the business of coaching, creator of the Hormone P.U.Z.L.E method, an infertility warrior, two-time boy mom, and women's health expert. This podcast is for women struggling with infertility, painful periods, terrible PMS, or really just any symptom of hormone imbalance that they are ready to eliminate for good. Tune in weekly as we interview amazing experts in the fields of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're going to finally help you put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get pregnant and eliminate those pesky symptoms for good. Are you ready? This season is packed with even more expert guests sharing groundbreaking knowledge, giving you that jolt of energy that you so desperately need, sending you lots of virtual hugs, and inspiring you to take your fertility into your own hands and make that baby. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now let's get started on your road to transformation. I am so excited about today's show. I am talking to Alex Caspero. She is the owner of Delish Knowledge and the author of Fresh Italian Cooking for the New Generation. As a consultant and media spokesperson, she works with companies to develop nutrition communication strategies, food photography, videography, and recipes. Her award-winning blog, Delish Knowledge, focuses on whole food vegetarian eating deliciously and simple, as is the co-founder of Plant Based Juniors, an evidence-based platform that helps parents navigate the world of plant-based prenatal and pediatric nutrition. Additionally, she is the co-author of Joyful Eating, Nourished Life, which helps others discover a happier, healthier relationship with food and their body. Oh, I love it. I love it. So listen in as we talk all about plant-based nutrition for fertility, hormones, pregnancy, and beyond. This is such a jam-packed show. You're definitely going to want to listen and take notes. All right. Well, without further ado, let's welcome Alex to the show. Hey, Alex, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. So tell us a little more about who you are and kind of how you started working in women's health.
Yeah. So my name is Alex Caspero. So I am a registered dietitian. Actually, ironically enough, my first job was sort of in this area a little bit. I started out in WIC right out of grad school, and that was such an eye-opening experience for me because I think I was like 24 at the time. I had, really never thought about anything related to kids and maternal health. So that was a fun onboarding. And then I completely switched directions, went and worked as a sports dietitian at a university, worked in eating disorders for about a decade, and then got pregnant with my son. And then, really started to kind of dig into the research that was out there. I was predominantly plant-based at the time, still am. And was like, okay, there's a lot of things that I want to know, and I don't really feel like I'm getting the answers that I need, and just sort of decided that was going to be something I was going to focus my research attention on. And, that was 4 years ago, and just has really sort of blossomed ever since. So it's sort of become an early interest, but then, of course, obviously with any sort of personal lifestyle change, just becomes more of a focus because that's where I'm currently at in my life.
I love that. I love it. And you talk about plant-based nutrition for women trying to conceive. So talk to me a little bit about that. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I will just sort of say over at Plant Based Juniors, we consider ourselves to be predominantly plant-based. And the reason for that is the idea that, if we look at all of the healthiest eating patterns, right? So if we look at blue zones, if we look at Mediterranean diet, if we look at DASH diet, sort of all of these diets that are ranked not only for longevity, but for reducing chronic disease, they all really have a plant predominant focus, right? So we're talking about large intakes of fruits and vegetables, lots of nuts, seeds, healthy fats, minimal dairy products. Sometimes they're included, and that's fine. Minimal animal protein, sometimes fish is included, but really a de-emphasis, especially on red meat and pork, and then a high emphasis on getting protein a lot from plant-based sources. So things like legumes, lentils, nuts, beans, soy foods. So we look at that and say, okay, we know that's true for chronic disease risk. We know that's true perhaps for even some longevity that's coming out. What does that actually mean for fertility? And the good news is that it's also linked as well, right? And so I think that when we talk about a plant predominant approach, I think for a lot of women that says, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? All of the foods I just named are really rich in nutrients. They're really high in antioxidants. They're low in some of the inflammatory things that are, commonly found in other of those animal-based foods. And I think that it also feels really aligned to say, okay, I don't necessarily think I want to go vegan, which can feel really restrictive and really, maybe not in line with what someone wants to do. But I think that shifting to a more plant predominant focus is a really sort of wide net that a lot of people can say, okay, that makes sense. And that feels really easy for me to do.
I love that. I love that. And we talk a lot about on this show, it's about balance, it's whole food nutrition.
Yes.
If it comes from the ground, if it's grown, if it lived on the earth, then you can eat it. So it sounds like you guys have a similar philosophy with your plant-based nutrition. So I love that. And so talk to me a little more, and it might be similar, but how does this affect our hormones?
I mean, there's hormonal health and as you know, gosh, and it's so multifaceted, right? And so I always like to preface this by saying that there is not, I don't think, one specific diet that is right for every single person, right? There's so many other factors that are going to go into it. Genetics play a role, environmental things that are happening in your life, stress, certain nutrients. So there's a lot to consider. So when I say these things, I don't want anyone to say, oh, she said this, I tried that, it didn't work for me. But what we do know from the collective body of research is that, things that are going to be important that we want to focus on, right? So vitamin D, getting enough folate, omega-3 fatty acids are really important, especially when we're talking about a plant predominant diet, low glycemic, complex carbohydrates. And then again, really shifting away from some of those animal-based foods. So we're talking about, improved hormonal health, but really with this shift on a focus on fertility. And this is what, the predominance of research shows. And that's really the thing that we recommend over at Plant Based Juniors.
I love that. And speaking of vitamin D, so can you talk to me a little bit about what is the difference between D2 and D3, and which one do we need?
Yeah, so let's just sort of start big view by saying that vitamin D is so important, right? We call this the sunshine vitamin, and that's because it's a precursor to so many hormones in the body. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, right? So thousands of years ago, we didn't need to get vitamin D really from anywhere else but the sun. And that's because our lives were so different. We hear so many women say things like, well, is it really natural to supplement? Why do I have to have this? It doesn't feel like it should be something that I need to be getting. And, our lives have changed. We don't live these natural quote unquote lives anymore. When we're outside, we likely have sunscreen on, or we're covered in clothes. We don't spend the predominant amount of our daylight hours outside with our forearms exposed, especially. And so for a lot of people, vitamin D levels can be low. Therefore, you need to make sure you're going to get it either in a fortified source or in a supplement. Vitamin D2, there's a lot of mixed research, honestly, about the various absorption levels. It seems that sometimes D2 is not as readily absorbed as D3. D3 is what we consider to be the more active form. And so you can get that in an animal-based source. So usually it's sourced from lanolin, which is based from sheep, or you can also get it in a D3, which is going to be sourced from mushrooms. And the research on those levels of D3, either from an animal or a plant-based source, shows similar levels of absorption. So if you're like, well, I'd prefer something that's a little bit more cruelty-free, rest assured that the D3 that you're going to be getting from that mushroom version is going to be absorbed correctly. And I'll just sort of end that by saying, D3, thankfully, is a really easy lab test to get. If you're going to your doctor already to get labs, you can just sort of see what your level is. DTT, I'm not super worried about vitamin D toxicity, but it's always good to know when you're supplementing these fat soluble nutrients, what your levels are. High levels of vitamin D can also play a role with hypercalcification. So we do want to just have a good understanding of where we're at. And then that sort of lets us know how much we need to be supplementing.
I love that. And always check with your doctor before you add any supplement. Just a little caveat there. You definitely, because we don't know what your levels are. We don't know what you're currently supplementing with. So just make sure that you check first. But definitely if you're experiencing any kind of, low mood or depression or any of those things that could say I have low vitamin D levels, then go to your doctor, get that tested, see if you need to supplement.
Well, and sort of a caveat on that too, that I'll just sort of add is that it's fairly common, right? So again, if we think about the fact of how we live our lives, yes, vitamin D is added to some dairy foods. It's added in some other fortified foods, but if you're not consuming those foods in enough, amounts, and if you're not consuming them every single day, it's really hard to rely on these fortified food sources. And so, especially depending on where we live, the winter just ended, a lot of us likely have these lower levels. So I think it's always a good idea, just sort of in your yearly physical, to make sure that you're asking your doctor about that vitamin D.
I love that. So let's talk a little about pregnancy. How should our diet shift if we are pregnant?
Yeah. So pregnancy, of course, is this, amazing period of growth. And so, when we think about what are the nutrients that are going to be important for growth, right? Whether we're talking about pregnancy, lactation, infancy, a lot of it's going to be the same things. First and foremost, we do want to have a focus, especially in the preconception sort of time period, on folate. We talk so much about folate, and that's the idea that, the folate is really important in helping to close the spinal tube and helping with neurological function. And so a lot of those developments happen sometimes before women even know they're pregnant. And that's why the recommendation is really to ensure that your diet is rich in folate, but then also even considering starting that prenatal even before you're trying for children, just because we want to make sure that your body has a good enough source of folate. The synthetic would be folic acid in the body. So that's the first thing I would say. Early pregnancy, to be honest, one of the big things I just really talk about to a lot of women is the grace that sometimes is needed, because, pregnancy can be really, really tough. There's a lot of nausea or, other sort of GI issues that can come on, and that can make it harder to sort of eat the optimal diet that you want. I used to always joke before I was pregnant, like, I was going to have this beautiful pregnancy with lots of abundant, salads and smoothies. And I mean, none of that happened in the first few weeks because I was so sick. I couldn't keep anything down. Thank goodness for like bagels. And, so that's one of the reasons that I highly recommend a prenatal, just because there are so many factors that go into it. So folate, iron is going to be important as well, especially when I'm talking to my predominantly plant-based or plant-based mamas. The recommendation currently is about 27 micrograms, and that's a lot, right? Even if you're eating meat, that's really ensuring that you're getting, something like 20 ounces of steak a day, which most of us aren't going to eat. And that's just also not something I'd recommend for all other, aspects when it comes to overall health. So your prenatal is going to have likely some iron in it, but then also focusing on iron-rich foods. And for plant-based individuals, that also means making sure that your iron-rich food is pairing with vitamin C, because vitamin C is going to help keep iron in that active form, and it's going to help increase absorption by about 4 to 6%. Other nutrients of concern we want to make sure is DHA. So DHA is sort of this unique molecule in the sense that only preformed DHA is able to cross through to the fetus and through breast milk. And what that means is that in normal sort of everyday life, right? So if I'm eating a lot of ALA-rich fats, so things like walnuts, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, etc., my body is going to be able to convert that ALA into DHA, into EPA, and I don't necessarily have to worry about adding another omega supplement unless I need to, unless my levels in my diet aren't as high. When it comes to pregnancy and breastfeeding, however, that conversion rate is really, really low, if not absent. And that's, again, because that preformed DHA is going to be what's needed to cross over. And so we really want to encourage all moms, not just necessarily plant-based ones, to ensure they're getting a source of DHA in the diet. Pregnancy, of course, we also don't want to have a lot of environmental toxins. So sometimes the recommendation for fish a few times a week is like, okay, but that also comes with increased risk of dioxins, of mercury. And so we think it's just sort of a safer bet to take algae-based DHA supplement. And the reason DHA is so important is because when it's in pregnancy and then up to about 2 years of life is really when we start to store as much DHA as we can in the brain. It's also really important for retina or eye development. And so it's sort of, what we know about what DHA does in the body, we just feel like it's really important and really encourage mamas to make sure they're supplementing or getting it in the diet somehow through pregnancy.
I love that. I love that. And to go back a little bit on folate, I know I'll have clients come to me and say, my doctor told me to get a folic acid in my prenatal. Why would we want folate versus folic acid?
Yeah, so folic acid is the synthetic version, right? So folate is what's naturally found in foods. And for a lot of women, we have to, so I'll just sort of go back and say, the synthetic version means we have to convert. So we have to take the folic acid and then convert it into folate to be able to absorb it. This is true with a lot of things, right? We talked about D2 to D3, keeping iron in that ferrous form, right? There's a lot of things that our body has to convert in order for us to actively absorb it. That's good on some levels, right? It helps sort of in this balance so we're not getting too much. If our body feels like, we're getting a lot from this source, it'll turn off some of those conversion factors. So the idea of conversion in nutrients is not necessarily bad. A lot of it is like a feedback mechanism. That being said, for a lot of women, especially those who have had issues with fertility, there is sometimes an inability to convert that folic acid into folate. And so especially if you've had issues getting pregnant, if you know that you have the MTHFR gene, you really want to ensure that you're taking the active, the methylated version, the folate version. Again, that's naturally found in food, but thankfully a lot of supplements are also starting to include more of the methylated or the folate version rather than folic acid in their prenatals.
I love that. And I find sometimes you don't know that you have that gene. And so you might not even know you're not converting appropriately. So I always recommend, try to eat foods high in folate just to make sure that you're getting the right amounts.
Absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of a predominantly plant-based approach is that it's a naturally very high in folate, right? Folate is going to be found abundantly in these plant-based foods. And so that's sort of one of the advantages to filling your plate with lots of plants.
I love that. So talk to me about myths. Are there any myths that you hear around plant-based nutrition?
Oh man, there's so many myths,
Right?
So let's talk a little bit about protein first, because I think that's one of those things that people hear plant-based or vegetarian or vegan. And, I think in our life, in our sort of like, westernized way we view wellness sometimes, there is such a view on protein. And I think that it's really important to kind of look back and say, okay, well, what does that actually mean? And how much do we actually need? We have an obsessive view on protein. And the reality is that most of us get plenty. If we sort of look at the averages of how much food Americans are consuming, not only do we get enough protein, but some estimates 1.5, 2 times the amount of protein. I'm not worried about your protein intake. It is true in pregnancy that number is going to increase, right? And so 70 grams a day can seem like a lot, but if you're concerned about it, what I would recommend doing is downloading like a free, nutrition counter, like a chronometer or something like that. Plug in your daily intake for a few days. My guess is that you're going to be getting plenty of protein. But again, the caveat being it's always nice to ensure that you're taking enough. The other myth we hear a lot about is, okay, well, if protein is so important, let's talk about soy, because soy, of course, is something that we recommend a lot. And I think that sometimes people hear the term phytoestrogen and hear estrogen and then think, oh gosh, I don't want a lot of excess estrogen in my body. The truth though is that soy, it does contain phytoestrogens, but phytoestrogens are not estrogen. In fact, phytoestrogens are able to bind either in this alpha or beta way, and that can either turn on or turn off certain things in our body. that means that sometimes having those phytoestrogens are not only not harmful, they're also protective. And we see this in the literature, right? When we look at Asian American diets especially, so traditional Asian diets, and even sometimes Asian American diets, who tend to have just much higher levels culturally of these soy-based foods, they have much lower reduced risk of hormonal-based cancers. So things like breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, all of those things we tend to associate with not wanting to have excess estrogen in the body. So the first myth I will say is not only is soy not harmful, it's likely also health promoting. And we also see that research in fertility as well. So, the Harvard study that looked at all of the various research that was out there and kind of distilled down the recommendations to make, they are very okay with having soy in the diet, but then also really considering the other protein sources. And again, like I said before, really reducing intake of red meat, of pork, maybe minimal amounts of chicken, fish, depending on if that's what you want to include in the diet, but understanding too that soy is not going to be harmful. And the isoflavones in soy have anti-cancer properties. They are not going to fuel cancer.
I love that. I love that. And I talk a lot about balance. Like we said earlier, it's all about balance. Like you don't have to eat 100% soy diet.
No.
You don't have to eat 100% meat diet. Like we want balance. We want lots of fruits and vegetables and a balance of the meats and the soy and all of those things.
Yes. And I think that's, sort of again, coming back to that like plant predominant approach. I'm not here trying to turn anyone vegan, anyone 100% plant-based. But I do think that if we look at sort of how the standard American diet is currently and what we know is optimal for health, there does need to be a shift. And for a lot of us, that means taking out some of the heavy, meat and dairy parts of the diet and really adding in more plants. We talk a lot about protein, but we're actually fairly deficient in fiber as a country, and adding in more plants will just help to naturally increase those levels, along with, again, all those other micronutrients.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to hear a word from our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to dive into practical tips on how to live plant-based. And I want to talk about your book, Joyful Eating, Nourished Life. So we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Hey y'all, it's Coach Kayla here. I hope you are loving this episode as much as I am. We will be back in just a minute, but first, a word from our sponsors. Hey girl, hey, have I got something exciting for you? My new VIP program to help you get pregnant, stay pregnant, and eliminate your hormone symptoms for good. Text the word intensive to 615-257-8855 for all the details. And don't delay, spots are filling fast and I only have a limited number. You are not going to want to miss out on this amazing new program. Welcome back. Thanks for being here, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's dive into some practical tips. Say somebody listening wants to start living more plant-based life. How do they start?
Yeah, awesome. So I would say the good news is you're already eating, I'm assuming, some type of plants, right? So we're really talking about just a ratio shift. And so for a lot of people that might say, okay, let's look at maybe perhaps breakfast. If breakfast is usually maybe some eggs, can you add in a bowl of oatmeal a few days a week instead? Can we switch those, the eggs and toast perhaps to toast and some avocado, make like an avocado toast, having a smoothie. Same thing for lunch. If lunch is typically, let's say, a salad with some chicken on it, can we swap in maybe some beans for that chicken? Or, can we have a little bit less chicken and add in some beans or lentils? I have 1,000 recipes on my website. So if you're like, oh, I want to know what to cook, I would definitely encourage heading there. I've got lots of different options for you. And then especially if you are, in charge of family eating, because I think that's something that we always hear about, is this idea that like, okay, well, I want to eat this way, but what about my teenager and my kids? So what I would say to focus on is the meals that you already have all accepted that are plant-based. So a lot of us eat plant-based meals. We just don't call it that, right? So a pasta primavera is going to be a plant-based meal. Stir fry, maybe with some tofu, is going to be a plant-based meal. A lot of ethnic cuisines are naturally sort of plant-based, right? So rice and beans, Indian kind of dals or curries, all of these are naturally really rich in these sort of healthy plant-based foods. And so if you can say, okay, we already like this, great, let's have it on the menu more often. And then also try to add in a few new foods that feel fun for everyone, really encouraging the entire family to get involved. So what I'll counsel my parents on is to say something like, okay, I know we all love tacos. Can we try lentil tacos tonight? Can we try maybe even adding some lentils to our ground beef tacos? I feel like it's a huge switch overnight. So the good news is that every single bit of plant-based eating has health benefits. Obviously, the more that we go into it, the more we lean into it, the more we're going to see those benefits, but really just encouraging people to start where they're at, taking this, sort of one day at a time, but finding what's going to work for you.
I love that. And I love lentils. Oh my goodness. One of my favorites.
Too.
I love to make a huge pot and eat on it
Yes.
all week.
Yes.
Oh, so delicious.
I do this marinated lentil salad where it's just literally lentils, tons of herbs. If I've got some, roast red peppers, something like that, I'll chop those up, a little lemon dressing, and it's great. I eat it right out of the bowl. I'll spoon it onto salads. I'll sometimes wrap it up in, with different things. So yeah, they're amazing.
Goodness.
And they're dirt cheap. So lentils.
Right. And where would we find that recipe? Oh my goodness.
So that is on my website on delishnowledge.com.
I love that. I'm going to have to go make that. Yes. So, any other tips you have for us to kind of get started with this?
Yeah, I think it's really just about figuring out what works for you, right? So if all of this sounds really new and you're not sure what to do, I would say start with maybe 2 or 3 recipes, right? So go on there. Thankfully, with all of the wonderful blogs out there right now, there is a plethora of places you can go find some recipes. Look at them, read them. Figure out okay, this sounds like a fun thing, make it an enjoyable thing. I think so much sometimes a diet shift feels like a restriction. And what we really try to promote is this idea of that it's additive, right? So we're adding foods to the diet. We're not necessarily saying you have to completely take away everything. It's more about addition. So if you've never tried tofu before, great, buy it. I've got a free on my website, Delish Knowledge, a 7-day plant-based protein course that kind of walks through all the different things you want to know about plant-based protein, but also ways to cook it. It's got 40 recipes in that free course, and really trying to sort of handhold someone who says, okay, I've had lentils, I think once in a lentil soup. What else do I do with them? And really trying to show all of the ways that these plant-based proteins are so versatile.
I love that. And I love talking about, you get to add things. You get to try these new delicious recipes. Have fun with it. Experiment. Try something new. It's so fun.
And I think also the idea of kind of stripping away the labels is that it doesn't have to feel all or nothing. I hear from so many clients sometimes, or even friends, who will say things like, oh, I used to be vegan, or I used to be plant-based, or I used to be vegetarian. And it's well, no, we still are these foods, right? You still eat vegan meals, you still eat plant-based meals. It doesn't have to be this line in the sand, because then sometimes I feel like if you don't do that one time, you feel oh, forget it, I can't do this. Instead of just saying, okay, well, sometimes I eat this way, or most of the time I eat this way. But then, if I want to go out with friends for ice cream or for pizza, there's that allowance too, right? It doesn't have to be 100% all or nothing. And that's true even with healthy foods, right? This is life. Right. I don't think it's healthy to be 100% healthy all of the time.
Right. I talk about that too. It's not so rigid. It's just you're flowing through and eating the food that you're naturally drawn to. And again, you're experimenting, you're having fun. It's not this cut and dry, I messed up, so I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah.
Well, and gosh, the impact that stress has too, right? If we're so rigid and so, stressed about the things that we're doing, it can also backfire. So I think really, I talk a lot about giving yourself grace, and that's really true with your diet and your approach to food as well.
Me too. I talk about that a lot. I love that. Just be kind to yourself, you deserve it. So talk to us about your books. I know you have a couple of books. One is coming out soon. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, like I sort of mentioned in the very beginning, when I became pregnant with my son, I was looking out there trying to find the evidence-based recommendations of okay, I know this diet, I've been eating this way for, almost 15 years now. I want to do it pregnant. I want to raise my child this way. Is it safe? And I feel like the messages I was getting was either this celebrity kind of, wellness influencer perhaps, who was saying, eat plants, don't worry about anything, it will all take care of itself. And the other end, I was seeing, some things being like, you cannot do this, it's not healthy, you have to include animal-based foods in your diet. And I was like, okay, I know that the truth is somewhere in the middle, and I couldn't find really that evidence-based way. So my business partner, Whitney, and I teamed up. She's a fellow dietitian. She's a good friend. We've been friends for a while, and we're like, okay, we're having such a hard time finding this information. Let's put that out there. And that's really how we started the idea of Plant-Based Juniors. And then our book, The Plant-Based Baby and Toddler, is really everything that I wanted to know, everything that I was searching for when I first became pregnant with my son. We talk about, nutrition for pregnancy. We talk about picky eating. We talk about starting solids. We talk about all of the nutrition considerations you might want to consider if you're trying to raise your children plant-based or predominantly plant-based. The book is very inclusive. We talk a lot about, parenting, feeding styles, and also how to talk to your kids about nutrition, because there's a lot of nuance there. Like I mentioned before, my background is in eating disorders, and I am very much of the idea that I want to raise my kids healthy, but I don't want them to be fixated on health and food either, right? I want them to have a very normal, very natural relationship with food. And a lot of that is how we sort of, introduce these concepts early on and how food is seen in our home. So there's a lot in that in the book as well. And of course, 50 recipes, because I'm also a plant-based chef, and I strongly believe that we can talk about nutrition all we want, but if we're not showing how to connect it, how to make it delicious, then it doesn't really matter. So.
Oh, that book sounds amazing. I can't wait to get a copy. Talk to me maybe your 3 most favorite recipes from the book.
Okay. So we have this enchilada casserole recipe that is so delicious. It's sort of born out of the idea that both my children love beans, but there's only so many ways I feel like I'm introducing beans to the diet. So it's sort of this one pot, super easy enchilada casserole. It's got our homemade cheese sauce. It's got lots of different beans. It's got veggies, and it's all tucked between layers of corn tortillas. So it's sort of an easy bake, enjoy. We make these blueberry cashew balls. So they've got oats in them. They've got nuts. They've got fruit, but they're really nice because they're just these little freezer balls. You can make a batch, keep it in the freezer, and then eat it. And then I also really love our blender muffins. So I'm always looking for snacks for my toddlers, they're always on the go or something's going on. And I just feel like I need to have a package of snacks in my purse. And it's hard to find foods that I find that I want to constantly be feeding my kids that are also portable. So I'm a big fan of muffins. So our blender muffins are really easy. Blend everything up, bake it, and then I can just keep them in the freezer, take a few out, throw it in my purse, defrost, and they're ready when my kids are.
I love that. They all sound delicious. Oh my goodness. So much fun. So let's talk a little about detox. Do you agree with detox? Do you have any plant-based foods that would naturally detox us?
So detox is I feel like it's one of those words that, in my opinion, gets thrown around, and a lot of it feels like either confusing or we're not quite sure, what that term means and how that means. So just wanted to set the stage. Our bodies naturally do a lot of detoxification, right? So that's what our kidneys are there for. That's what our liver is there for. That's what our lungs are there for, right? They clean out the air, and they sort of detox any of those pollutants that are coming our way. So for most people, we're doing a really good job of sort of detoxing, quote unquote, naturally. There are some things, especially a healthy diet, that can help us just to sort of eliminate things that we want. So, my big thing that I talk a lot about is fiber. If we think about fiber and the way that we eat in a diet, I kind of want us to think about fiber as a web. So if I'm eating a really fiber-rich food, right, let's say beans or whole grains or fruits, anything with soluble or insoluble fiber, it's going to form this web in my digestive tract that's going to help to sort of bring things along with it in order to eliminate. So it's going to bind hormones. Or excess hormones. It's going to bind excess, fats, especially biofatty acids. It's going to bind excess cholesterol and sort of take it out as we excrete it and go to the bathroom. So Fiber is another one of those reasons that a plant-based diet is so wonderful for sort of these natural sort of detoxification processes, and also lots and lots of water. Water also helps us filter through. It's really great for, for kidney health. And so I think sometimes that there is a lot of focus on perhaps things that feel like, oh, that's an expensive supplement, or I don't really get that in the diet. But I think if we can focus on more water and more fiber, that's going to allow our body sort of naturally, quote unquote, detox things out.
I love it. And I always talk about natural detox with exactly what you said, getting lots of fiber, getting lots of water, and just allowing your body to do what it needs to do naturally. And you don't have to do all the like potions and,
Yes.
pills and all that stuff. So,
well, and a lot of the science on that stuff too is, there's anecdotal reports. There might be a small study here or there, but I think when it comes to widespread sort of like overall wellness, a lot of it doesn't hold truth, and it's not, sort of universal. And so I really say, yes, of course, antioxidants are important. Of course, all of these vitamins and nutrients that are going to allow our bodies to do what they need to do, but trusting that if you're eating healthy, if you're eating a lot of fiber, if you're drinking a lot of water, your body is able to sort of detox and process what it needs to out.
I agree. I love it. So talk to me about your freebie. What can people tell us about that, and where can they find it?
Yeah, so I've got lots of freebies. So I sort of wear two hats. So I've got my Delish Knowledge hat. That's sort of my like recipe-based hat. Like I said before, I've got that free 7-day course on plant-based protein. You're welcome to sign up for that. Get it. It's got 40 free recipes in that. And then over on Plant-Based Juniors, we also have lots of freebies. So we've got a fertility freebie. So it's like a checklist of all things that women can do, but we also have a men's version too, because I think sometimes with fertility, we talk so much about the women, but the men are really important as well. And we know that sperm quality has changed a lot, especially over the past few decades, and lots of reasons why that is. So making sure that both of us are sort of on the same page when it comes to getting pregnant. We also have a freebie on supplements. Supplements are one of those things that I think is really can feel overwhelming sometimes, especially when it comes to kids and what you need and what you don't need. So we put together sort of our supplement guide. It's completely free. It just goes into things to consider. If you need something, of course, things like B12, possibly vitamin D3 is likely going to be something that you're going to need to do, and where to find that, and sort of, the best things to look for. And then we also have a few freebies on milk and plant-based milk. That's a lot of other questions we get when it comes to raising kids is, okay, if I want to limit my cow's milk, what else do I give it? And does my kid even need milk? So we've got lots of free handouts over on that, and that's all over on plantbasedjuniors.com.
I love that. I love it. And you're also on Instagram.
Yes.
Tell us kind of where we can find you on social media.
Yeah, so we're super active over on Instagram. Plant-Based Juniors, it's at Plant-Based Juniors. And then if you're looking again for some like recipes, it's at Delish Knowledge.
I love it. And we'll link all that in the show notes so
Awesome.
People can easily find you. They can get your book, which comes out May
18th.
May 18th.
Yes.
Awesome.
The Plant-Based Baby and Toddler launches May 18th.
I love that. So any final thoughts before we close here today?
No, I think one thing that I talk about a lot is, especially I think sometimes when we listen to these conversations, what I always tend to focus on is focus on what you're doing already, right? I think there's so much sometimes this pressure to change or to do this and not that. And, there is a lot of nuance when it comes to nutrition, but I think it can be really helpful and feel really empowering to say, okay, these are all the things I'm already doing. Where can I do more of that? Again, like I talked about before, where are those sort of added behaviors? And then it feels less likely that you're feeling like you're going to have to like punish yourself, or that you're going to have to make these like huge overwhelming changes that might not be where you're, mentally able to do right now. So really focusing on the positive, I think, is a really important thing to do when it talks about, some of these lifestyle changes that perhaps we want to make.
I love that. Oh, well, thank you so much, Alex. It was so fun getting to know you and to have you on the show. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, guys. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. Hey, hang on just 1 second before you go. I want to make sure that you are aware of all of the amazing free resources that I have for you on my website at CoachKayla.com. From a fertility meal plan, a cycle syncing quick start guide, a holistic healing cookbook, as well as master classes, blog posts by me and some amazing experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition. So many wonderful resources that will help you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of infertility, but there just wasn't. And so that's why I decided to create all of this for you. So make sure that you go and check it out and you take advantage of this plethora of support that I have provided for you. And spoiler alert, these were some of the same tricks and the same foods that I used to get myself pregnant, not once, but twice, even after my doctors said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. Make sure you take advantage of that. And I cannot wait for you to be my next success story. So thanks, love. See you soon. Thanks for tuning in today to the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. Check out the show notes for today's episode at CoachKayla.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.